we have get out of here. Okay, we have Ket Aleph. If one throws a get to his wife and she is inside her house or inside her courtyard, she is divorced. If he threw it to her inside his house and inside his courtyard, even if it was with her in a bed, she is not divorced. If he threw it into her lap and into her basket, she is divorced. If he said to her, take this note of indebtedness, or if she found it from behind him and she read it and behold, it was her get, it is not a get until he will say to her, this is your get. If he placed it in her hand and when she was sleeping and she awoke and read it and behold, it was her get, it is not a get until he will say to her, this is your get. If he was standing in public property and he threw it to her, if it was close to her, she is divorced. If it's close to him, she is not divorced. Half and half, she's divorced and not divorced. Okay.
Also, Kiddushin. Also, Gimel is yours.
It was mine, but what am I doing? The same is true concerning Kedushin, and the same is true concerning a debt. If his creditor said to him, throw me my debt, and he threw it to him, if it falls close to the lender, the borrower gains. If it's close to the borrower, he is obligated. If half and half, they both divide it. If she was standing on top of the roof and he threw it to her, once it reaches the airspace of the roof, she is divorced. If he was above and she below and he threw it to her, once it leaves the domain of the roof, even if it was erased or burnt, she is divorced. Okay.
Is this little more in that Mishna?
Beis Shammai says.
No. Did you finish that one?
Sure.
Sorry, you didn't finish that one. Okay, right. Once it leaves the roof. Okay, Beis Shammai says Poter Adam is Ishto Beget Yashan. So Beis Shammai, this is listed in the Avios as one of the kulas of Beis Shammai and the gumers of Beis Hillel, that a man is allowed to divorce his wife with an old get. We're going to see what an old get is in a minute. Okay, Beis Hillel Austrian. I say you cannot do an old get. Ezu get Yashan kol shenisiyachet ima achar shekasavola. So any time that let's say if a husband wrote a get to his wife, and he put so obviously the software is going to write the date on which it was written. But the effectiveness of a get only happens when the get is handed over. Just I got to let a cat out now. So the effectiveness of the get only happens when it's handed over. So technically speaking, a person could write a get that's dated on the 1st of the month and hand it over on the 30th of the month, and it's a valid get. However, once the husband has decided that he's going to divorce his wife and is holding this over, that he's not allowed to be in yechud with her anymore, according to Beis Hillel. Why? Because it can lead to a situation where it doesn't look good, because if she conceives and she turns up pregnant and single, says, oh yes, she's a divorcee, but they look at her get and say the date of this divorce is way before the child was conceived, so that's not gonna look good, and basically I'll say that get cannot be used once he's doing the with her. Okay. Now, I think they agree that the diavad, if a man did divorce his wife with an old get, it's still valid. Okay, Mishna Hay. If the get was written in the name of a kingdom that is unfit, which is, in other words, a kingdom that isn't ruling in that place. So, for example, if you're in France and you write a get according to like the King of India or something like that, that's inappropriate. The Shum Malchus Madai, the Shum Malchus Yavan. If you write or if you write it for a kingdom that doesn't exist anymore, like Media or Greece, Lavinia Habayis, or of the Beis Hamikdash, which doesn't exist anymore, the Churban Habayis even, because the time must be written according to Tzedakanos Chachamim, and this is where basically we've been introduced to a concept over here that the nusach of the get has to be according to the formula that Chachamim will provide, to the extent that if you did not follow their formula, the get is possible. Okay. And Okay. Haya b'mizrach b'kasa b'marav b'kasa b'mizrach. And now, what do you mean? What the mizrach means that get puzzle. Hold on, this little subtlety over here. Oh, if he even makes a mistake about the location of where it was written. So apparently in the get, it's written the location of where the get itself was written, and even if you made a mistake in that, such a small detail, the get is puzzle. And then we go through this whole thing. Now this we saw before in Ivamos, or is it in Kesuvos, where she yeah, it was in Ivamos, where the husband, where you know, remember when we had a case where we had Adis Isha, a witness came and said the husband was dead.
Yeah.
And based on this, she remarried, and then the husband turned up. And we have this Tetse Mizeh thing over here, where she must be divorced from both husbands, and she loses her kasuba, and every single one of her rights is messed up. And that's what happens if she has a pasul get. She has a pasul get, and she remarries based on this pasul get, and turns out the get is pasul. She must now get a new get from this husband and from that husband. And then the Mishna spells out all the same sanctions that are placed on her for both from every single monetary privilege that she had is lost. Okay. She doesn't get paid out of ksuba. She doesn't get payos. She doesn't get mazonos. She doesn't get blaus, which is anything that she's worn out. And she has no claim on either husband. And if she had already seized from them, tachzir, she has to return it. So note over here, the vlad mamzer mizeh, not really true, because from her first husband, it's not a mamzer. This would be right. If she went back to her first husband after the second husband, so this is called because he is a because it's a love. Now Rabbi Akiva even holds that it's a mamzer even if there's a love involved. Hold on, is this actually Kahati seems to hold that this is called a mamzer midrabanan if he takes her back and has children. Oh, why? Because she's not just she's asur to boil. Okay, so either it's because it's Rabbi Akiva's opinion, or because there's somebody who holds that there's a mamzer drabanan over here. And if two of them are kohanim, they may not become tamei if she dies. And the husbands also are not, since she cannot claim mazonos, they also don't get her metzias. They don't get anything that she makes either. They cannot annul her vows. If she was an Israelite girl, she may not ever marry a Kohen again. According to those who say that only a Levi is allowed to eat maser, which is not the halacha. Bas Kohen mina truma. She may not go back to her father's house and eat truma anymore because she has had illicit relations. And nobody, none of her heirs can claim her kasuba. So if we had star banin dichrin for her, right, where she's supposed to, if she dies, her sons are supposed to get first dibs on the value of her kasuba. And if the husbands died, if there are no children, then both husbands need to give her chalitza. Why do both husbands need to give her chalitza? That's an interesting question. I just suddenly thought is only the first one should have to do it, but the second one also has to do it. Why? According to Rabbi Meir, who holds that כל משל ממטבע שבצבא גיטין תצא ועבלת ממזר ואין הלכה כן. So all of this in our Mishnah is according to Rabbi Meir, who holds that if you change the nusach of the get at all, then the whole thing is pasul and the vlad is mamzer. Okay, but the halacha is not like Rabbi Meir apparently. That we do tolerate small deviances. Okay, Shina Shemo Ushma, if the get changed his name or her name, Shemira or Shemira, if there's a mistake in his city or in her city, and the same thing goes that this is called the get pasul, because there's a change, and that's possibly different. Why wasn't that mentioned among all the other things we said? But the preamble to the first lot of Tetzei Museum was that he wrote in the West when he was really in the East. So why not mention it also in the same thing? It's possibly because there's more of an agreement on the fact that that if he changes his name or her name, because that would seem to be a much stronger psul in the Kesubah. But it's still curious, because I would imagine that the Mishnah would have said the consensus case first, and then Rabbi Meir would have come in and said Af ha-kosev b'maravu b'mizrach. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but nonetheless, I think we get the point of it now. Mishnah Vav. All the cases where we said the taros of is mutar. So remember, in the beginning of Yevamos, we had these 15 relationships where the brother could be married to her, but it's an erva to the surviving brother. And we said in such a case, the co-wives are also mutar.
Right.
They don't even need a chalit, so they can just go free. Okay. So halchu hatzaros ha'elu v'nisu. So now the tzara who was free to go without a chalitza, okay, she goes and remarries. Okay. And now v'ninsu elu ailonius. And now it turns out. So let's just take a case where you've got Shimon and Reuven brothers. And Reuven's got a daughter Dinah, okay, and Shimon is married, to Dinah and some other woman, Chana, right? So now Shimon dies. Reuven can't marry Dinah because Dinah is his daughter, and Chana is free to go, therefore, because she can go and remarry without a chalitza. So now some other guy goes and marries Chana. Okay. And now it turns out Dinah turns out to be an Ailonis. She's infertile, incapable of being married, and therefore her original marriage to Shimon was basically an error. And it turns out that Chana retroactively did require Yibum. So now she's a Yavam Lashuk. She went and married somebody else, and now our Tana comes and says, she must be divorced from everyone and lose her kesubah and all these sanctions that we said before. This has got to be Rabbi Akiva, because Rabbi Akiva is the only one who holds that the Yavam Lashuk, which is a love, is going to be a mamzer, and the halacha is not like Rabbi Akiva. Rather, it's just like a kohen who marries a divorcee. It's an isur, yeah, but it's not. The blood is not a mamzer. The blood is simply a halal. Okay, and so similarly, or Israel to mamzeres, or mamzer to Israelis. She still gets a kesubah, even though he has to divorce her. She still has to get a kesubah. That is actually the halacha with the Yavama who married illegally without getting a chalitza. So halacha doesn't follow this Mishnah. All right, we're done there. Let's go to hey.
If he wrote the date of the get according to the reign of a kingdom, which is it?
Stop. Gittin hey. Back to.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Hey, Mishnah.
Hey, sorry. Rabbi Yochanan ben Gidda testified that a deaf mute girl whose father married her off can be divorced with a get, and that a minor, the daughter of a non-Kohen who is married to a Kohen, may eat truma, and if she dies, the husband inherits her, and that for a stolen beam which was built into a large building, he shall take its value for the sake of penitence, that a stolen sin offering, whose status was not known to the public, atones for the sake of the altar. There were no extortionists of land. There were no extortionists of land in Judea in the time of those slain at war. From the time of the slain at war and onward, there are extortionists there. How? If one brought from the extortionist and then brought from the owner, his purchase is void. From the owner and then from the extortionist, his purchase is valid. If brought from the husband and then brought from his wife, his purchase is void. For the wife and then from the husband, his purchase is valid. This is the original ruling. The court came after them and said, one who buys from an extortionist gives the owner 1/4. When is this? When they do not have with what to buy. But if they have with what to buy, they take precedence over any person. Rebbe convened the court and they voted and enacted that it is to remain with the extortionist 12 months. Whoever is first to buy it acquires it, but he gives the owner 1/4. A deaf mute gestures and he is gestured by Ben Betzera. However,
you put the comment.
I know I put it in the wrong place. A deaf mute gestures and is gestured to Ben Betzera. However,
Ben Betzera says.
Ben Betzera, however, says he moves his lips and is communicated with by means of lip movements. In transactions involving chattels, young children's purchase are the purchases, and the land sales are sales in transactions involving chattels.
Okay.
These things.
Sota. Yeah. Sota base Gimel.
When he comes to write the scroll, from what point does he write? From if no man has lain, but if you have stayed while under the authority of your husband, but if he admits and the Kohen shall adore the woman, he then writes, may Hashem make you for a curse and an oath. These curse-causing waters shall enter your innards to make the belly bloat and the thigh fall away. But he admits, and the woman shall answer, Amen, Amen. Rabbi Yosi says he made no break. Rabbi Yehuda says he writes only, may Hashem make you for a curse and an oath. These curse-causing waters shall enter your innards. And he admits, but he admits, and the woman still answer, Amen, Amen. He cannot write it on a tablet or on a papyrus or on an unprocessed skin, but only on a scroll as it is stated in a book, and he may not write with gum or vitriol or with any other substance that leaves a mark, only with ink as it is stated, and he shall dissolve a writing that can be dissolved. To what does the see apply? Amen, Amen. Amen to the curse, Amen to the earth, Amen to regard to this man, Amen regard to another man, Amen that I have not committed adultery while betrothed, while married, while waiting Yibum, or when having been married in Yibum. Amen that I have not been defiled, and that I have that, and that if I have been defiled, these curses should come upon me. The man said, Amen that I have not been defiled, Amen that I will never become defiled.
Okay. No, that's it. That's 3.
Okay.
Kesubos Aleph Gimel.
If an adult male was intimate with an infant girl, or an immature boy was intimate with an immature female, or a woman was injured by a piece of wood, their ketubah is 200 zuz. These are the words of Reb Meir. The Chamin, however, say the ketubah of one injured by a piece of wood is 100. A virgin who is a widow, divorcee, or who has performed chalitza after marriage, in all these cases, their ketubah is 100 zuz, and no claim concerning their virginity can be lodged against them. A proselyte, a captive, and a slave who were ransomed, converted, or emancipated over the age of 3 days in a year, 3 years in a day, their ketubah is 100, and no claim concerning their virginity can be lodged against them. If one eats in his father's house in Judea without witnesses, he cannot lodge a claim concerning her virginity against her, because he excludes himself with her. Both the widow and the non-Kohen and the widow of a Kohen have a ketubah of 100 zuz. The court of the Kohanim would collect 400 zuz for a virgin, and the sages did not stop them.
Okay.
Okay, and we have
Shabbos Gimel.
A cane for olives. If there is a knot at its end, it is susceptible to tumor contamination, and if not, it is not susceptible to tumor contamination. In either case, it may be taken on the Sabbath. Rabbi Yossi says all utensils may be taken except for a large sword and a coulter. All utensils may be taken either out of necessity or not out of necessity. Rabbi Nehemiah says they may not be taken except out of necessity. And all utensils may be taken on the Sabbath. Fragments of them may also be taken. Let's see, and maybe taking with them, provided they can still be used to perform some sort of task. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl with which to cover the mouth of a cask, or fragments of a glass with which to cover the mouth of a flask. And Yehuda says, provided that they can still perform in the nature of the former task. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl with which to pour porridge, or fragments of a glass into which to pour oil. And Taharos. Okay. Zion Chet. If someone was tahor and diverted his attention from eating, Rabbi Yehuda rules him tahor, since it is the way of tamei people to separate from him. But if we come and rule him tamei, if his hands were tahor and he diverted his attention from eating, even though he said, "I know that my hands have not become contaminated," his hands are tamei because a person's hands are active. If a woman entered her home in order to bring out bread to a poor man, and she went out and found him standing next to loaves of truma, and similarly, if a woman went outside and found her friend stirring coals under a pot of truma, Rabbi Kiva rules tamei, while the sages rule tahor. And Elazar ben Pila said, "Why does Rabbi Akiva rule it tamei when the sages rule it tahor? Because women are gluttonous, and she is expected of covering the pot of her friend in order to know what she is cooking."
It'll be more curious, I would say, rather than gluttonous.
Yeah, and not a good word. If one lives together with an Amaret in a courtyard and he forgot utensils in the courtyard, even sealed earthenware barrels or sealed earthenware oven, these are tamei. Rabbi Yehuda rules the oven tahor when it is sealed, and Rabbi Yossi says even the oven is tamei, and he makes a partition for it that it is 10 tefachim high, hand breadth high. Okay, that's it. And we have Benachos. Okay. All must perform leaning except for a deaf, mute, an imbecile, a minor, or a blind man, a non-Jew, a slave, and an agent, and a woman. Leaning is considered a remainder of the precept. It is done on the head with two hands. In the place where the leaning is performed, the animal is slaughtered, and the leaning immediately precedes the slaughterhouse. There is a stringency to the right of leaning over the right of waving, and the stringency to the right of waving over the right of leaning. One may perform waving on behalf of all the fellow owners, but one may not lean on behalf of all the fellow owners. The stringency of waving is that waving applies both to the individual and communal offerings while living and while slaughtered, and while living matters with non-living matter, which is not the case with leaning. When Mishna says the Omer was brought on the Sabbath from 3 saw, and on a week day from 5. But the Chachamim say whether on the Sabbath or on a weekday it comes from 3. Reb Chanina, the administrator of the Kohanim, says on the Sabbath it was reaped by an individual with 1 sickle and in 1 basket, and a weekday by 3 in 3 baskets and 3 sickles. So the Chachamim say whether on the Sabbath or a weekday it was done by 3 people with 3 baskets and 3 sickles.
That's
it? Okay.
That's it.
Okay, have a great Shabbos. Enjoy.
Good Shabbos. See you on Sunday.
Sunday.